Okay, in this video, I'm going to show you where you can go to get ideas and resources for test prep strategies. Now, a lot of the strategies that I'm going to show you here are great for overall engagement at any time of the school year, not just for standardized test prep. However, we know that standardized test prep can be a little extra stressful. It can seem mind-numbing. It can create a lot of stress for both kids and teachers. So that's what I'm going to show you here is what's available to you. But just keep in mind that what I'm showing you is so applicable to just increasing engagement at any time of the year. Okay, so we are inside the lesson plan area. When you're logged in, of course, this is what you see first. We're going to scroll all the way down past the 6th, 7th, and 8th grade lesson plan units. We're going to scroll all the way down past the bonus resource library. Still scrolling. And then you get to the very bottom, the on-demand trainings for professional development, a growing library of resources. And the very top one you see is test prep strategies, adding and uploading new materials, because that's where we are right now. So I'm going to click on this. Okay. And now that we're inside, first of all, I have a special test prep strategies for standardized tests just for the members of our lesson plan community here. So if this is something that you want to watch again, if you've already seen it, or if you haven't seen it yet, it goes through so many different and very specific ways to engage your students in test prep that doesn't really feel like test prep, especially if you're in a situation where you have to shut down what you're normally doing and review. Some teachers are lucky enough to be in a situation where nothing much changes, but others, depending on where you are, depending on what the needs of your school are, depending on where the pressure's coming from, sometimes it's not an option and you have to do something for test prep. So this video is here for you to give you some ideas around that. You can also fast forward through the video as well. So if you watch it once and then you want to go back and see a certain part again, you can do that. All right, we're going to scroll down here. Yes, there's a PD certificate available as well. But here's the part I really wanted to show you. This part is games and interactive elements that were discussed in the video. And actually, a few things have been added here since I created the video. So these are all resources that are linked into my personal Google Docs files, okay? So you'll want to make sure you actually save the file first so that you can download it to your own computer in case you want to make changes. Okay, a lot of resources, right? So these are all discussed in the video, like I said, but these resources are excellent for any type of engagement that you want to implement throughout the school year. But when it comes to test prep, I know I've had questions from members before about how can I implement some activities into stations or into centers or rotations, or how can I kind of break up my class to make test prep helpful, useful, interesting, and to where it just doesn't seem like we're doing drill and practice every single day for a month, right? So all of these are resources you can click on. So if I click here, we have our Tense for Talking. This right here would be an excellent station activity or a small group activity. But you can see here, Tense for Talking has opened up. We have our short story tent if you want to do a review of fiction. We have poetry, even literary nonfiction and informational texts. We have figurative language, we have even some drama, and the 180 days prompts is inspired from the Penny Kittle and Kelly Gallagher book called 180 Days. So that was a prompt inspired by them. But let me click on one of these here just to show you. We'll just click we'll do this one, the short story tent. This will open up. Okay, it looks like this because this is a tent. You fold it in half, and then students have these sentence stems rich with academic vocabulary. There are two different sets here to help them become comfortable with using words and with reading, writing, and speaking the way that we need them to read, write, and speak, not just for standardized tests, but for how we want them to interact with the material, right? And so this is a way to help them get comfortable with the way that we need them thinking and speaking and writing. So many kids miss test questions because they don't get what the question's asking. And so these tense are designed to help them become comfortable with the kind of academic vocabulary that we need them using. Okay, so that was just for fiction, but you can see how, I'll click on it one more time. But when I go back in, okay, here we are. If you need ideas for how to actually use the tense, how to make them work in a station setting or what to do with them, click right here where it says for the teacher, because this gives you the instructions and the rationale for using the tense. It also gives you some ideas for what you can do once you're finished with the tense. What's the next step for your kids to do? But that would be a fantastic station activity right there, tense for talking. Okay, let's look at the dice game. This is one that works really well for a whole class. You can display this on your presentation board, but you can also make it work for small groups. So you can give your groups dice. They simply roll the dice, discuss the topic or question with their partners. Okay. If you're doing this as a whole class, then you can let the students know that you as well are rolling a dice and you don't know, even you don't know, which student is going to be called on. So that keeps it random. That helps with accountability, because if there are 6 students in a group, all 6 students need to be able to answer the same question if you call on them. So that helps them prepare, and it stops one kid from doing all the work, because if one kid is doing all the work and you roll a 3 and the student who is a number 3 cannot answer, that's on the group. That means the group did not collaborate and work together the way they should have. That's if it's a whole class. Now, if it's a small group, you could have 6 students in a group, and what you do is, like, here's one for drama play questions. You could have 6 students in a group, and they can simply take turns rolling the dice and then responding to these questions. They can respond through discussion, and then they can follow up with that response by writing. So there is a dice, I guess you could call it a card, for every major genre. So see here we have fiction, and these are standards-based questions, especially when you start looking at how does the main character change by the end of the story, or the role of a particular type of conflict, or the way that a setting impacts the plot or the characters. Here's one for expository informational questions. Okay, looking at summarization and main idea and author's purpose. Here's one more geared towards persuasion argument questions for small groups. So you can see how much use you could get out of these right here. You could do stations to where each station is doing a dice game, but maybe the text, maybe the selection is a different genre. Or you could work this into a rotation to where students are interacting with a particular genre, but in different ways. Maybe they've got the tense at one station, and then they've got the dice game at another station, right? There's so much here that you can use and that you can mix and match. We even have poetry. I can keep going. Figurative language and sensory questions, which ties back to author's purpose. And there's even a set here for paired passage, those questions that typically come up with paired passages. Okay, so you can see right there, you could do tense for talking. Imagine having 6 or 7 groups of students in your classroom where they're all doing tense for talking, but perhaps each station is a different genre. You could do the same thing for the dice game. Maybe every single group in your classroom is doing a dice game, but this group has fiction, and this group has expository, this group has poetry, whatever it needs to be. Or you could switch it up further, and one group has tense for talking, one group has a dice game, one group has these task cards, and maybe they're all doing the same reading selection, but they're interacting with it in different ways. Okay, so let me click on the academic terms and task cards and show you some options there also. Okay, there are 3 ideas for use. I won't read through all of them, but these will work for whole class or small groups. But essentially, you have these task cards available for your students. So imagine cutting them out horizontally. That's one of the options, but there are others that I explained up here. There are 3 different options. But students have the word, the academic word, they have a definition, and then they have an example of how it's used in the sentence. And so this is something you can do to help students become more comfortable with some of those high-level questions and the way that they use words in those questions. Again, so many kids have asked me, you know, when we're practicing, when we're just doing practice in class, I don't understand what this question means. What are they asking? And then I explain it in real terms and they say, oh, I get it now. And so it's because they're not used to using some of these seemingly arbitrary words, these words that are used in strange ways, or these words that they've never really seen before. Or they've seen them before, but they just don't remember. I can't tell you how many times we've gotten to March or April, and I've still had kids ask me what convey means. We've been using it all year. It's convey, but you know what I'm talking about. Those things do happen. So there are several different ways that students can use these academic terminology task cards, 3 different ways. So that right there could be another station idea that's interactive. This one's very similar. Clicking on the 15 academic terms for practice. This is another way of looking at those same terms I just showed you. So of course there are more than 15 terms, but we're just looking at 15 right here. So what happens here is, and you do not have to give this to your students all at once. You could cut these into strips. You could, maybe just give students, maybe give a student group just 3 or 4 to work with. You could do this any way you want, but it's pretty straightforward. They get the academic term, a quick, very short definition of what it means, an example for how to use it, and then they get to try their own. So you can imagine using something like this with yet another reading selection. So instead of giving them a reading selection and the questions that go with it, simply give them the reading selection and ask them to create their own questions about that reading selection using these terms. You could put students into groups. Let's say you have 6 stations in your classroom or 6 groups. Maybe they all have the same reading passage, but perhaps each group has a different set of terms from this handout. There are 15 here. You could probably come up with more, but even with 15, if you had 5 groups in your classroom, each group could have 3. Cut these out, just give each group 3, and perhaps their goal is to come up with 3 questions about that selection using these academic terms. Then imagine your groups switching questions with each other or sharing their questions with the whole class. You're doing test prep. You're helping them read and reread and think about the material, and then own the material by coming up with their own questions using these kinds of words that you know they're going to encounter on those standardized tests. So it's fun for them. It's a different way to look at it, and they love to answer each other's questions and even to ask you a question. You'll definitely have kids who, even with the definition, even with the example, you'll definitely have kids who still don't use the word correctly because they don't always understand the importance of suffixes or which words can function as nouns and verbs. They don't always get how to manipulate the endings of words so that they make sense. But really, if they're trying and if they're interacting with the word, if they're bringing some ownership to that word that they're using, they're still getting so much of a benefit from doing that. A kid who might ignore the word functions because he doesn't understand it in the sentence, I would much rather him misuse the word functions, but have an overall idea of what it means, if that makes sense. So this can be another station activity right here. Just looking at those words and becoming comfortable with using them. Okay, so next we have Common Core questions and sentence stems and Texas TEKS questions and sentence stems. So you could click on either one, whichever one pertains to you. And even if you don't use either of these standards, it's still a really good way to expose kids to the different methods that questions are asked of them. So the reason you see so many different sets here is because they're broken up by genre. So let's just pick one randomly here. Okay, so grade 7 expository informational. Okay, so whether you're using Common Core or not, it's a good way to help kids understand what different questions are asking, because in real life, things that we read in real life are not labeled as Texas TEKS or Common Core or Indiana or Arizona. Things that we read in real life are not broken down that way. So really, if you just want to expose your kids to some different ways that language works, these are fantastic ways to get started. And so like here, I just showed you the expository informational questions, sentence stems. Down here we have fiction literature. So if you're looking for some different ways to challenge your kids, if you're looking for some ways that you can make sure that you're asking the right kinds of questions, this is a fantastic help. So those are there for you for Common Core and Texas T. So those are things you can use yourself when you're trying to think of questions on your own. And if you want to challenge your kids, you can even have them start using those question stems or sentence stems to come up with their own questions over what they're reading. And that is valid even for test prep, because you can tell so much about what a student thinks and understands based on the kinds of questions he's asking. Let's look down at the discussion cube templates. This is another one that would work really well for stations or small groups. So there are a couple different levels of questions here, but you can see at the title says these are for persuasive texts. And so again, it's working with those high-level questions, but simply in a different way, in a slightly more tangible way. You can tell that these could be cut out, taped together pretty quickly, and then students have a cube. If you have foam cubes or anything that you can actually write on, you could use these for that as well. But you can also have students simply cut these out so that they have something tangible, something a little bit more kinesthetic and hands-on to work with. So all genres are written here. It's just another way to get them interacting with questions the way that we want them to. And you see that we have A and B, A and B. That's because A is more of our level 2 questions, if that makes sense to you, level 2 questions. And then level B are your higher level questions. I guess you could say your level 3 or level 4 questions. No level 1 questions here. There are no questions to where the student can simply point to the answer in the passage, because that is not the kind of thing that standardized tests ask for. And then of course there's a blank one here at the bottom, so you can do whatever you want to with it, or even have your students create some. Paraphrasing the question is, this is a quick little handout to where, and I talk about how to use this in the test prep video above all these resources in the lesson plan area. But essentially one thing you can do is give your students the passage, give your students the questions, this might be from an old test, and tell them they don't need to actually answer the question right now. All you're wanting them to do is write the question number, paraphrase the question in their own words. In other words, do you understand what this question's even asking? Can you paraphrase the question in your own words? Do you even know what the question's wanting you to do? Write that here. And then to take it a step further, again, you're not having them answer the question yet, but to take it a step further after they've paraphrased the question is that you can have them simply read and identify where they would go to get the answer, right? Just give me the paragraph and the line number in the paragraph for where you are seeing text evidence for what would be the answer to the question. And sometimes that's just a refreshing way to get kids to think deeper and read more closely without actually having to nail down a correct answer. It's just a different way to help them slow down and stop rushing through the questions and stop missing questions because they're not understanding what the questions are asking. So this is a double dip page, I guess you could say, because you could print it off, cut it out, use it for your kids that way. And then finally, there's just a few practice assessments from all across the United States. Sometimes it gets tough to look for different types of resources when you need a passage and just something to practice with. And so these are just some different resources from different places in the country. It almost doesn't matter what state you're in, because when you're just trying to expose your kids to as much as possible, that's the goal. I just want to expose them to as much as I possibly can so that they're ready for anything. And so these are just a few resources you could click on where you could get different types of passages, even look at different types of questions. There's a lot that you could do with them. Grades 6, 7, and 8 are all represented here. These are certainly not the only resources. I just compiled these and curated these from what's available online in case you need something different. We get to that point in the year where it seems like we've used up all of our resources and we just need something different, and we don't have time to do a whole lot of searching online. So that's the purpose of that right there. Okay, just a few other things to show you. These are resources pulled from all over the lesson plan resources. Okay, they're just curated here in case you need something quick and you don't want to go digging through all of the other resources in the lesson plan area. So I've already curated these. So let's say, point of view and main idea are big ones. So if you're looking for point of view analysis, like I really just want to dive into point of view, these are a collection of mini passages, M-I-N-I, mini, selections from classic literature, and then there's a set of 4 questions, and it may seem redundant, but it just provides a lot of practice if point of view is something that your students are struggling with. So short passage, 4 questions, right? Short passage, 4 questions. And it's just getting kids used to the different ways that they will see point of view questions asked. It's just to build their confidence so that when they see point of view, when they see those questions, it's something that they've seen before. So some of those questions, when you look at them, may seem repetitive and redundant, and they are, but it's to build confidence that when kids see point of view questions, they know what to do with them and they know what they're asking. So that's one. But we have, poetry, figurative language, argument and persuasion, fiction and nonfiction paired texts, even some advice for main idea and details that are actually engaging. So this is simply a collection of different strategies for how you can get kids a little bit more engaged, looking at main idea and details in a slightly different way. Okay, the last thing I wanted to show you in this section is if you need more ideas or resources, click here for the Google Drive spreadsheet I have that you're welcome to scroll through and search based on grade level, genre, skill, etc. If you need more paired passages, let me show you what to do. So we're going to click here because paired passages is always a big thing. This tells you the genre in the left-hand column, the title of the selection, the grade level. That's important because if you go through and if you see something, oh, theme, I need to review a little bit of theme. Where do I go to get that? You would go to grade 6, fiction week 3, and you're looking for the ant and the grasshopper. Or let's say you want to review, you need paired passages. I just want to pull several paired passages and have my kids do that, regardless of what grade level you teach. Anytime you see the word comparison, that's a paired passage. It means that something about that article or something about that reading selection is paired with something else for the purpose of comparison. So you're scrolling through and just keep in mind that you have this column F here. This is where you can look. So I want to do some comparisons, some paired passages with an argument unit. I need to review some elements of argument. So it's in, grade 7, you've got a lot of selections, grade 7, argument persuasion week 3, I know what I'm looking for, okay? Or I might scroll down even more and I could find more in 8th grade. In fact, there's some here in the expository unit, comparison passages. There's comparison in the narrative unit. That's a really good one to look at. So, and then all the way down into grade 8, you could look at that there. So this is to help you figure out, okay, there are so many paired passages and I can look for quick skills. I can pull the passage, I could pull anything. I know where to go to get it. I know that I could grab this one from, grade 8 descriptive unit week 9 and I could find what I need, what I'm looking for. So you can find those resources and then think about how you could take any of those reading passages and pair them with any of these activities for stations. And at this point, regardless of what grade level you teach, don't think, well, I only teach 7th grade, so I can't pull the 8th grade. Of course you can, absolutely. And then you could build your stations from these activities, right? So for example, I'll click here again. Let's say I really need to focus on some paired passages and I'm really looking for some nonfiction articles. Okay, well here we go. Let's say comparison. It's in the grade 6 section. That does not mean that 7th or 8th graders couldn't benefit either. But okay, so I'm looking for text features. Okay, so laser tag articles, there are 2. It's in grade 6, nonfiction week 3. I know now that I can go back to the lesson plan area. Hang on just a second. My computer's running slow. Here we go. And I know now that I can go up to, oh, okay, grade 6. I can go to nonfiction elements, and I think it was week 3, right? So I could click here on week 3, or I could just download week 3 right here, and that passage is going to be in there, and I know exactly what I'm looking for, okay? Then I'm just going to go and click the little back arrow here. Then I'm just going to go down here, and let's say I want all my students to be reading that same passage. I want all of them to be reading it, but I want different groups doing different things with that passage, okay? So because that's one way you could do stations or rotation. So I'm going to have all my groups reading the exact same paired passages, but group 1 is going to do tense for talking, and since that's a nonfiction paired passage, I definitely want to pull this one right here, the literary nonfiction 10. Or maybe I want to pull the informational expository 10. Maybe I want both. Maybe I'll give them a choice. So that might be one station, right? Okay. And then maybe I want another group, group 2. They're also reading that exact same paired passage, but this time I want that group to be doing one of these dice games. Okay, so I want the dice game that's all about, expository informational. That's what I want. So maybe they're going to do this one. Or, hey, they're paired passages. If I scroll all the way down to the bottom, I remember that there's a special dice game specifically for paired passages. So maybe group 2 will do this one. So group 1 is doing the tense for talking. Group 2 is doing the dice game. Okay. So what can my other groups do? Well, I definitely want my kids working on some academic terms. So I think I'm going to have one of my other groups working on this handout. Now, I don't want them doing the whole handout. They can't do that in the amount of time I'm giving them. But what if I told them to choose any 5 off this entire list? Choose any 5 words and make up your own questions or your own, sentences, make up your own commentary, make up your own questions using any 5 of these words. You have examples here, right? Your students would have this page, they'd have these examples here. Maybe that's a different station. So now they're reading the exact same passages, but they're doing something different with it. They're looking at it in a different way. And then I come back over here. Maybe I want another group to do the discussion cubes. Yeah, that'll be fun, sure. So let's see. I don't want the persuasive ones. I don't want the poetry ones. I don't want the drama ones. I don't want the fiction ones. Oh, there we go. I want the expository informational ones. So I could give my kids, I could give them in that group, I could decide, well, do I want that group to have the, the on-level questions, or do I want to definitely give them the more challenging questions? Maybe I give them both and I let them decide, but that could be yet another station, okay? So right there, how many stations do I have so far? One's doing tense for talking, one is doing the dice game, one is doing the academic terms, one is doing the discussion cubes. Okay, well, I could give another one the paraphrase the question. Maybe I want my 5th station to be this one. Maybe I want them to, maybe I have questions I'm going to give them over those passages. Maybe I pulled those from that unit, and now I just want them to look at how, what do the questions mean? What are they asking you to do? So that could be another station. And then maybe I have 6 stations. Maybe I'm the teacher station and I have a 6th station. Maybe I'm pulling my struggling babies. Maybe I'm pulling my on-level kids to make sure there are no gaps. Maybe I'm pulling my above level, above grade level kids. And maybe I'm going to use some of these question stems and just sit down and just talk with them about what is happening in those paired passages, right? Those could be my stations, and those could be the activities. So you can see how, yes, all these activities are available in the test prep strategy section of the lesson plan area, but there's no reason that you can't use these all throughout the school year to up the engagement with your kids. Many of these do appear throughout the regular lesson plan. So if you're using these lesson plans all year long, then this is not the first time your kids will have seen these activities. It's just that these are pulled together as some more engaging resources all in one place for one purpose. And that one purpose is to really get your kids engaged in what is happening in the classroom, especially during test prep season. So I hope that helps. I hope that makes sense. I hope that gives you some ideas. And I can always use this little back button up here. So again, when you first log in, we're going to scroll past the 6th grade, 7th grade, 8th grade lesson plan units. We're going to scroll past the bonus resource library. And what I just showed you is right here. It's in the on-demand training section. And I clicked on test prep strategies. We see the video here, really useful stuff. You can even skip around if you want. If you've seen this before and you know you need to see a particular section again, that's really helpful. But again, this is how we got here. That's how we got to the beginning. Now, if you're thinking, okay, I'm definitely interested in doing something different for test prep. I'm definitely interested in using stations. I'm not sure how to do that. Look down here. Below test prep strategies, we have centers and stations in the middle school ELA classroom. And so that would be a fantastic training for you to click on and watch at your own, on your own time when you feel like it. There are a couple others here too you might find helpful, but I like the critical close reading strategies, the easy realistic differentiated instruction, but I really wanted to just point out that if you need some help with centers and stations in your middle school classroom, there's another training here for you that's ready to go.